3 Necromancer builds that are already good, but with the help of the Sacrilegious Soul ring, turn 400% stronger. At first glance, the ring merely seems good, convenient, but if you look a little bit deeper, it's quite crazy. Every second a corpse explosion doesn't sound that impactful, but if you dig deeper, getting a free corpse explosion and a free corpse handle every 8 seconds is bonus stun, stagger, bonus essence, because every corpse explosion is also essence, and you also trigger fueled by death for free. Plus, we're getting here ranks to corpse skills, and ranks to corpse skills essentially means that the whole multiplier of corpse explosion just goes higher. And this can be utilized now in a couple of builds to truly make them crazy. The first one that comes to your mind is the Lidless Storm build. That is using Lidless Wall to create copious amounts of bone storms to then zoom through the dungeon. Now here we're already using corpse explosion and corpse tendrils quite frequently, and we're having bone storm as an extreme source of damage as we turn it into a shadow bone storm with the aspect of the ultimate shadows. Now, if you consider that we already get an incredible crit rate bonus to this and damage reduction as we're zooming through and having all the bone storms, now we're also getting the free corpse tendrils, which are continuously happening. They're making actually blood orbs in this case because we don't need the vulnerable since dashing gives us vulnerable. And now with the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, we're continuously getting bonus stun, stagger, blood orbs, and also bonus corpse explosions. We already have 5 ranks in corpse explosion, and then we get another ranks in corpse skills bonus just through that. And we can take even an amulet that has ranks in corpse skills, yes, to boost that even further. Now to escalate the build, to make it truly go crazy, your second ring is Ixfeld's Corroded Signet, that now with lucky hit chance on top and the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul, your damage over time effects can explode. That means your Bone Storm can, on top of just bone storming around, the shadow damage it does explode, and critical strike, which is boosted by continuously having Lidless Wall up and the bonus critical strike chance of 20% all the time, together with corpse tendrils and the aspect of the grasping veins, which gives you another 20%. Now pair that together with T-Bolt's Will for dashing and getting a damage multiplier of 40% and primary resource, as we're actually going to be using Blight on top, because Blight is also damage over time. Blight has a good base lucky hit of 40%, and yes, the initial shot of Blight can also crit, which then can trigger Ixfeld's again and lead to even more damage. The defense is aspect of the Shielding Storm, so you don't ever die. And Soulbrand as technically bonus damage reduction could also kick Soulbrand out for just disobedience on the chest to feel a bit better there. Now we're missing the aspect that creates Desecrated Ground on Blood Mist, but I don't think it's actually needed as we have Ixfeld and the Ring of Sacrilegious Souls running together, and the important part is having Lidless Wall. Technically, if you don't have Lidless Wall, you put on a Focus, and that would then go into the Blood-Soaked aspect for the Trail of Shadows that Blood Mist leaves behind. Now we get to talk about Explosive Mist on the boots. Technically, that's nice, but practically, you're also losing 80% potential ultimate skill damage. Because Flicker Step does exactly that. It reduces the cooldown of your Bone Storm, so that's always up as you're dashing through, and you're dashing always through for the Metamorphosis power. Gives you bonus movement speed, which is also attack speed if we're going for Ravenous. But most importantly, it gives plus 80% in ultimate skill damage, which vastly kind of boosts the Lidless Wall Bone Storm combo. Problem is, if you play Explosive Mist together with Ring of Sacrilegious Souls, that you might get to the point where the Blood Mist making bonus corpses, and it only makes 1 corpse every second, these corpses get essentially exploded by the Sacrilegious Soul instead of the Explosive Mist, so you're not anyways getting the cooldown reduction, and you don't need Blood Mist that frequent because this is not Infinimist, this is Lidless Storm. Now for the Vampire powers, you need Metamorphosis and Prey on the Weak for the bonus Vulnerable combo, then Anticipation for 20% cooldown reduction, but also your ultimate skill stain 12% increased damage for each nearby enemy affected by your damage over time effects. Not good against bosses, or not that good against bosses, but another 12% is another 12%, but extremely good as you're zooming through the dungeon. Followed up by Domination for the bonus damage against Stun, Freeze, Frozen. Domination can be swapped out for Ravenous, have a little bit more attack speed, just have faster corpse explosions if you're triggering corpse explosion, faster blight if you're triggering blight. And last but not least, Flowing Veins for the 60% increased damage over time to enemies that are affected by Vampiric Curse. Now, the skill tree you can find in the link in the description below. That's kind of self-explanatory. And for the Paragon Glyphs, you play Scourge, extremely important because that is more damage over time. And also, you deal more damage to enemies affected by shadow damage over time. Into the Send of Death board for damage reduction or bonus damage with the Imbiber Glyph for more damage while healthy. Here, you could also think about playing Exhumation instead of Imbiber, because you're anyways taking both intelligence notes and there's extreme many intelligence notes on the way. So it's kind of like a little bit choose your poison here. Could go over this side, right? Instead, like min-maxing this a little bit, just squeezing out the last bit of intelligences. Actually, this is the maximum of intelligence. You get plus 60 and you do more damage with your corpse skills and get damage reduction plus fortify. It ain't a bad thought, which then brings us into the Wither board. And here you generally want to take as much intelligence as possible and the bonus shadow damage with darkness, which brings us finally to the Flesh Eater for the 40% multiplier on eating corpses. And this one happens also way faster when you're using the Sacrilegious Ring, which is amazing. And then we also have the Control Glyph for bonus multiplicative damage on stunned frozen enemies. Last but not least, we would go into the Bone Graft board for the insane amount of armor and life. And then last but not least, we could put on Territorial, damage reduction from close enemies and bonus damage versus close enemies. Or alternatively, we could choose to get the Essence Glyph because we're critical striking a lot. And we're also going to be using our Ixfeld's Corroded Signet that can explode critical strike wise. Therefore, with the whole amount, like we have like 50-70% critical strike running, it might be worth it to get the bonus 22% on your crit strike damage that the Ixfeld's just blows up harder. Now that sounded good. How about a Mendeln Summoner? Yes, Mendeln Summoner, but this time completely different. Because the Mendeln Summoner in this case is also going to play the Lidless Wall. Yes, you see I'm a fan of using the Lidless Wall with the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul and Ring of Mendeln, which will now allow us to go around, make Bone Storms, to always be healthy on the Shielding Storm, to never like take any weird amounts of crazy damage. Then we have our minions tagging along. And yes, on the chest with the Vicious aspect, on the boots with the Bloodgetters aspect, we get our bonus skeletons that they're always tagging along. And then we got Blood Mist as we're Blood Misting around, Decrepify to reduce our Blood Mist cooldown with the Corpse Explosion and the Corpse Tendrils. The Corpse Tendrils in this case still making Blood Orbs, and we all know Blood Orbs also heal our minions right now. So with the free Sacrilegious Soul casting, we're not only resurrecting the minions if they die, we also continuously make Blood Orbs that will heal our minions. And yes, the Sacrilegious Soul also raises a Skeletal Priest every 8 seconds if you're maxed out on minions. Now we're running the Blighted aspect for the maximum shadow damage. This is so important on the neck. You want the Blighted aspect, and the aspect of the ultimate shadows on your wand for the lucky hit. And then aspect of the Grasping Veins for the maximum of critical strike damage, because Ring of Mendeln again still goes for that crazy amount of critical strike damage. Now the pants, last but not least, has the aspect of Disobedience to shore up your lacking armor and your minions armor at the same time to make both of you just a wee bit more tanky. And yes, we're probably going for skulls together with the rubies and amethyst to make this work. And here we're using skeletal mages for the bonus Shadow Bolt to just stack Shadow Blight even more. We get more corpses from the Reapers, and we sacrifice the Golem for the bonus critical strike damage. Now, this is meant to be played like Infinimist, but not Infinimist. It's like a Lidless Storm, but not a Lidless Storm. But you're supposed to be running with your minions into the opponents, not fearing anything. And keep in mind that Bone Storm has an incredibly good lucky hit chance, which will allow you, together with the Blood Mist and generally boosting your lucky hit chance and having Corpse Explosion happen for free and Corpse Tendrils happen for free, which also trigger lucky hit chance, to just get constant Mendeln procs, but you yourself are invulnerable and your minions can just blast everything into pieces. And yes, all the stats will also be here, so you know what to actually look for. Now for the Vampiric powers, it was a bit tricky to make the right choices. You want Feed the Coven, but it's kind of weird to choose Feed the Coven because you don't need the essence it produces. But Feed the Coven essentially gives you a free 10% damage for 4 seconds. But this one is happening all the time because it's lucky hit, 60%, free 10% damage. And this is absolutely unconditional. There's no stun, there's no frozen, no chill, no nothing. It works against everyone, always. Bosses, minions, elite, blah, whatever. It's just crazy. Feed the Coven is just so good. It's free 10% damage. Metamorphosis for the vulnerable, anticipation for the cooldown reduction on the ultimate, as this is going to be big parts of our damage regardless still. And then flowing veins for the damage over time, and Coven's fangs to have our minions also be able to put vampiric curse on. And here we could now make a curveball and consider that metamorphosis might not be needed because we don't need the unstoppable. We have Coven fangs to technically put on vampiric curse, so the metamorphosis could also be prey on the weak because we kind of want that constant source of vulnerable, and I think it would be fitting way better into this to make it work. Now for the Paragon board, things get a little bit interesting. We're starting with the Amplify glyph for more damage versus cursed enemies. The main reason you put Amplify in here is because you want also the armor and the damage nodes to get maximum push, because it kind of like triples the value of these nodes. It's way too good. That brings us into the Flash Eater board for the bonus multiplicative damage on the Essence glyph for the super crit damage on Ring of Mendeln, which gets followed up also here by the Dead Razor board. Yes, Cult Leader on the right side, put in Dead Razor glyph, get the minion damage reduction because you want them a bit more survivey. Then we're traveling up into the Wither because you want the Wither node for the bonus damage on your damage over time things with the Darkness glyph. And here now it gets tricky. Right side into Send of Death for damage reduction or more damage. Then Scourge glyph for more shadow damage over time, which then brings us also vice versa down into the Cult Leader board again for the Armor Clad node for maximum minion life and minion armor. Don't forget that the maximum minion life you're getting here works multiplicative on all the maximum minion life you have already. And this is why that node is so good. Because if you have 200% already and you're getting like the 10% bonus, another 5%, another 5%, so 20% total bonus on everything you have maximum minion life wise, makes them truly tanky. Now, technically, you could also swap out the Amplify glyph for the Mage glyph to get your minions more elemental resistance because they get 35% increased resistance to all elements. The problem here being that you kind of auto summon your minions back anyways with your glyph. So I don't see why you would technically make them even more survivey, because worst case scenario, if they get blasted, they get automatically summoned back anyways the whole time. And the priest is healing them constantly due to the Sacrilegious ring. It should hold up, but worst case scenario, that is what goes out. Amplify for the Mage glyph. Now a third build, and this is going to be called Lidless Lance, the Sacrilegious Soul plus Overpower build, where you're going to be using Blood Lance together with the Bone Storm into also Lidless Wall to be unkillable, zooming through dungeons and doing millions. I think the highest I've seen is 8 million with this currently damage. Funny part is that we actually lowered the damage by using Aspect of the Embalmer on the pans instead of using T-Bald's Will. Now, here's the thing though. You can use T-Bald's Will as well, kick out Soulbrand, which gives you 40% damage reduction though, and put on a chest with the Aspect of the Embalmer. That is totally possible. We're playing the Sacrilegious Soul. On the other ring, you play Potent Blood for bonus essence on taking Blood Orbs. Now with Aspect of the Embalmer, you make Blood Orbs on corpse consumption. The Sacrilegious Soul consumes corpses with Corpse Explosion the whole time. Your Corpse Explosion also triggers the 40% bonus damage from the Flesh Eater Paragon board. And interestingly enough, we get the 6 Essence from Grim Harvest. So every Corpse Explosion is 6 Essence. Every Blood Orb we get is 15 to 20 at this point. So we're getting like 21 Essence for consuming a corpse and making a Blood Orb. And then with Gore Quills, you're actually picking up these Blood Orbs to cast more Blood Lances for more damage. Don't forget that Fueled by Death also gives us that 9% multiplicative bonus damage all the time. This gets paired with Flicker Stab for the bonus damage on the Bone Storms, even though Bone Storms are not the most damage here, but the movement speed of Flicker Stab is so important. Here, generally, any boots that give you an insane boost of movement speed is wanted, because we need the Ravenous Vampiric Power that gives us bonus attack speed paired with our movement speed. So the more movement speed a boot has, the better it is. Now we have the Banished Lord's Talisman for our overpower crits to do even more multiplicative damage, Since we have Lidless Wall and Bone Storm running all the time, we have the 20% bonus crit chance, an aspect of the Grasping Veins with the other 20%. So right now this build is at 70-75% critical strike, which constantly has us overpower crit strike, especially as we're having the Blood Boil Vampiric Power, which also gives us a bonus overpower together with Rathmas Vigor. And Rathmas Vigor anyways triggers so much because we're constantly consuming Blood Orbs to reduce the cooldown of Rathmas Vigor. Last but not least, aspect of the Shielding Storms so that we get a constant barrier, 20,000 life, 20,000 barrier. Pair that together with the damage reduction we have and we turn into an Undying Calamity. Get a sacrifice your mages for overpower. Get a sacrifice your skeletal warriors for bonus elemental resistance. Could also go for the bonus critical strike chance. Possible if you have enough resistances on your items. And then you don't go for bonus life. No, we actually make our critical strikes do even more damage. Other vampiric powers is Prey on the Weak for the vulnerable effect together with Metamorphosis. And this is also where T-Bolt's Will comes in because Metamorphosis allows you to constantly trigger that. Ravenous again for the attack speed, Blood Boil for the bonus overpower. And here, this one is a free slot. You can reduce the cooldown of your Bone Storm, so you always have it ready with anticipation. Alternative, you could get more damage reduction on lost life. You can heal on every cast, or you could play Domination to deal even more damage. What I did experiment with is actually Terror, because Terror gives you permanent critical strikes on feared enemies. Fear is also stagger on bosses, and stagger on bosses is so easy to achieve because you get the bonus Corpse Tendril cast the whole time. So with the Sacrilegious Soul now consistently also making bonus Corpse Tendrils, then with the Curse on your Decrepified too, getting them kind of like consistently staggered, and then when you get permanent crits, and that's the interesting part against the boss, all your crits will overpower at some point anyways as you're using 300 resource, Rathmas Vigor, and also the Blood Boil. So it's like guaranteed Banishlord Talisman procs. Very good. For the Paragon board, we're getting with Blood Drinker to fortify as we're picking up Blood Orbs. That brings us into the Bloodbath board for the bonus overpower. Yes, this is very important. Paired with the Control Glyph for the bonus damage against stunned enemies. And yes, we do have completely stunned. And then if they're staggered, which we do even faster, this also works against bosses. Now then into the Blood Begets board for multiplicative damage on picking up Blood Orbs with the Dominate Glyph, maximum 54 willpower. And now the change, there's actually the Flesh Eater board coming instead of the Bone Graft board because we're getting multiplicative damage on picking up corpses. Yes, really good. Here into the Essence Glyph for more critical strike damage, which works then together with our permanent critical strikes. And last but not least, the Send of Death board with the Imbiber Glyph. Sadly, only 30 points to boost Imbiber because I just really have no other points left over to put anywhere in here. But if you can squeeze another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points out somehow that you found somewhere, I mean, technically we could reduce our critical strike damage here a little bit to then boost the Imbiber Glyph even more for even more damage while healthy. That ain't all of it. There's another 3 builds plan. And yes, I'll also be showing you how each of these builds actually performs against Uber Lilith in a tier 100 dungeon, just as kind of like a comparison. And there's overall a tier list coming for all these builds in the next days, weeks. Now, want to see the new Lidless lands in action? Or are you still rather the Blood Surge player? Enjoy.